for a second. Still, there was no visible end of the mud. In alarm, she thought, "How long does it last? I can't keep this up. Oh!" The guiding tread of the previous car was suddenly lost in a mass of heaving, bubble-scattered mud like a batter of black dough. She fairly picked up the car and flung it into that welter, through it, and back into the reappearing swastika-marked trail. Her father spoke. "You're biting your lips. They'll bleed if you don't look out. Better stop and rest." "Can't. No bottom to this mud. Once stop and lose momentum. Stuck for keeps." She had 10 more minutes of it before she reached a combination of bridge and culvert with a plank platform above a big tile drain. With this solid plank bottom, she could stop. Silence came roaring down as she turned the switch. The bubbling water in the radiator steamed about the cap. Claire was conscious of tautness of the cords of her neck in front, of a pain at the base of her brain. Her father glanced at her curiously. "I must be a wreck. I'm sure my hair is frightful," she thought, but forgot it as she looked at him. His face was unusually pale. In the tumult of activity, he had been betrayed into letting the old despondent look blur his eyes and sag his mouth. "Must get on," she determined. Claire was dainty of habit. She detested untwisted hair, ripped gloves, muddy shoes. Hesitant as a cat by a puddle, she stepped down on the bridge. Even on these planks, the mud was 3 inches thick. It squidged about her low, spatted shoes. "Ich!" she squeaked. She tiptoed to the toolbox and took out a folding canvas bucket. She edged down to the trickling stream below. She was miserably conscious of a pastoral scene all gone to mildew. Cows beneath willows by the creek, milkweeds dripping, dried mullenweed stalks no longer dry. The bank of the stream was so slippery that she shot down 2 feet and nearly went sprawling. Her knee did touch the bank, and the skirt of her gray sports suit showed a smear of yellow earth. In less than 2 miles, the racing motor had used up so much water that she had to make 4 trips to the creek before she had filled the radiator. When she had climbed back on the running board, she glared down at spats and shoes turned into gray lumps. She was not tearful. She was angry. "Idiot. Ought to have put on my rubbers." "Well, too late now," she observed as she started the engine. She again followed the swastika tread. To avoid a hole in the road ahead, the unknown driver had swung over to the side of the road and taken to the intensely black earth of the edge of an unfenced cornfield. Flashing at Claire came the sight of a deep, water-filled hole, scattered straw and brush, debris of a battlefield, which made her gaspingly realize that her swastikaed leader had been stuck and instantly her own car was stuck. She had had to put the car at that hole. It dropped far down, and it stayed down. The engine stalled. She started it, but the back wheels spun merrily round and round without traction. She did not make 1 inch. When she again killed the blatting motor, she let it stay dead. She peered at her father. He was not a father just now, but a passenger trying not to irritate the driver. He smiled in a waxy way and said, "Hard luck. Well, you did the best you could. The other hole there in the road would have been just as bad. You're a fine driver, Dolly." Her smile was warm and real. "No, I'm a fool. You told me to put on chains. I didn't. I deserve it." "Well, anyway, most men would be cussing. You acquire merit by not beating me. I believe that's done in moments like this. If you'd like, I'll get out and crawl around in the mud and play turtle for you." "No, I'm quite all right. I did feel frightfully strong-minded as long as there was any use of it. It kept me going. But now I might just as well be cheerful because we're stuck, and we're probably going to stay stuck for the rest of this carefree summer day." The weariness of the long strain caught her all at once. She slipped forward, sat huddled, her knees crossed under the edge of the steering wheel, her hands falling beside her, one of them making a faint brushing sound as it slid down the upholstery. Her eyes closed. As her head drooped farther, she fancied she could hear the vertebrae click in her tense neck. Her father was silent, a misty figure in a laprobe. The rain streaked the mica lights in the side curtains. A distant train whistled desolately across the sodden fields. The inside of the car smelled musty. The quiet was like a blanket over the ears. Claire was in a hazy drowse. She felt that she could never drive again. Chapter 2. Claire Escapes from Respectability. Clair Boltwood lived on the Heights, Brooklyn. Persons from New York and other parts of the Middle West have been known to believe that Brooklyn is somehow humorous. In newspaper jokes and vaudeville, it is so presented that people who are willing to take their philosophy from those sources believe that the leading citizens of Brooklyn are all deacons, undertakers, and obstetricians. The fact is that North Washington Square at its reddest and whitest and fan-lightedest, Gramercy Park at its most ivied, are not so aristocratic as the section of Brooklyn called the Heights. Here preached Henry Ward Beecher. Here, in mansions like mausoleums, on the ridge above docks where the good ships came sailing in from Surabaya and Singapore, ruled the lords of 1,000 sails. And still it is a place of wealth too solid to emulate the nimble self-advertising of Fifth Avenue. Here dwell the fifth-generation possessors of blocks of foundries and shipyards. Here, in a big brick house of much dignity, much ugliness, and much conservatory, lived Clair Boltwood with her widower father. Henry B. Boltwood was vice president of a firm dealing in railway supplies. He was neither wealthy nor at all poor. Every summer, despite Claire's delicate hints, they took the same cottage on the Jersey coast, and Mr. Boltwood came down for Sunday. Claire had gone to a good school out of Philadelphia on the main line. She was used to gracious leisure, attractive uselessness, nut-center chocolates, and a certain wonder as to why she was alive. She wanted to travel, but her father could not get away. He consistently spent his days in overworking and his evenings in wishing he hadn't overworked. He was attractive, fresh, pink-cheeked, white-mustached, and nerve-twitching with years of detail. Claire's ambition had once been babies and a solid husband, but as various young males of the species appeared before her, sang their mating songs and preened their newly dry-cleaned plumage, she found that the trouble with solid young men was that they were solid. Though she liked to dance, the dancing men bored her. And she did not understand the district's quota of intellectuals very well. She was good at listening to symphony concerts, but she never had much luck in discussing the cleverness of the woodwinds in taking up the main motif. It is history that she refused a Master of Arts with an old violin, a good taste in ties, and an income of $8,000. The only man who disturbed her was Geoffrey Saxton, known throughout the interwoven sets of Brooklyn Heights as Jeff. Jeff Saxton was 39 to Claire's 23. He was clean and busy. He had no signs of vice or humor. Especially for Jeff must have been invented the symbolic morning coat, the unwrinkable gray trousers, and the moral rimless spectacles. He was a graduate of a nice college, and he had a nice tenor and a nice family and nice hands, and he was nicely successful in New York copper dealing. When he was asked questions by people who were impertinent, clever, or poor, Jeff looked them over coldly before he answered, and often they felt so uncomfortable that he didn't have to answer. The boys of Claire's own age, not long out of Yale and Princeton, doing well in business and jumping for their evening clothes daily at 6:30, Lida-loves and admirers of athletic heroes, these lads Claire found pleasant but hard to tell apart. She didn't have to tell Jeff Saxton apart. He did his own telling. Jeff called, not too often. He sang, not too sentimentally. He took her father and herself to the theater, not too lavishly. He told Claire, in a voice not too serious, that she was his helmed Athena, his rose of all the world. He informed her of his substantial position, not too obviously, and he was so everlastingly, firmly, quietly, politely, immovably always there. She watched the hulk of marriage drifting down on her frail speedboat of aspiration and steered in desperate circles. Then her father got the nervous prostration he had richly earned. The doctor ordered rest. Claire took him in charge. He didn't want to travel. Certainly he didn't want the shore or the Adirondacks. As there was a branch of his company in Minneapolis, she lured him that far away. Being rootedly of Brooklyn Heights, Claire didn't know much about the West. She thought that Milwaukee was the capital of Minnesota. She was not so uninformed as some of her friends, however. She had heard that in Dakota, wheat was to be viewed in vast tracts, maybe 100 acres. Mr. Boltwood could not be coaxed to play with the people to whom his Minneapolis representative introduced him. He was overworking again, and perfectly happy. He was hoping to find something wrong with the branch house. Claire tried to tempt him out to the lakes. She failed. His nerve fuse burnt out the second time, with much fireworks. Claire had often managed her circle of girls, but it had never occurred to her to manage her executive father save by indirect and pretty teasing. Now, in conspiracy with the doctor, she bullied her father. He saw gray death waiting as alternative, and he was meek. He agreed to everything. He consented to drive with her across 2,000 miles of plains and mountains to Seattle to drop in for a call on their cousins, the Eugene Gilsons. Back east they had a chauffeur and 2 cars. The limousine and the Gomez-Dep road